And thank you so much that you do this little talk with me, Biba.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it.
We just had a joint adventure and a conference for Danish and international solution-focused practitioners on, and this was our working title, How to Have Better Conflicts in Organizations. And working on that, we came up with this idea to tell the best stories or the most important findings from this work, and talk about it. What did you learn on this way when thinking and making conference workshop on having better conflicts in organizations? So if you take some time, maybe it's nice that you might introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing?
Yeah, okay. I'm Biba. I'm a European from the UK. And I work with different organizations and individuals as a trainer. So sometimes in soft skills, sometimes in solution-focused practice. And also part of that is in the UK more of a clinical practice, so working with clients in therapy, counseling and such. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat because this conference has been very interesting. I remember us talking about when you said we had the working title of How to Have Better Conflicts. That immediately touches upon how we talk about the matter, like the big elephant in the room, doesn't it? Because I get the impression, I mean, when working with leadership or management or teams, that conflicts should be avoided, or that there should be some sort of prevention in order for conflicts to happen, as if it's some object somewhere out there. And we often see, I guess, phrases like conflict management, conflict resolution. So language reflects this, doesn't it? And that kind of embodies conflict as something which can be removed. But you and I, and those of us who work with the solution-focused framework, we see it, and that's not arguing which one is better, or like, I mean, both can be supported by evidence solidly. We see it more as interactional, don't we? As conflicts emerging, happening, and not necessarily meaning something negative. I mean, they're a sign of something, a wish for something to be different, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. From this interactional view, it's also very clear that it's about the connection between people, or two people or more people. As such, it's a beautiful, valuable piece of work to clarify the connection and the relationship, the working relationship between these people, if a need for that occurs, for instance, through not really happy connections and not really happy working relationship. So this is maybe the main thing I got from our work and preparation on this conference, to see how many different cases show that negotiating together a preferred way of being, working together, talking to each other, allows such a beautiful, fresh way of getting over things which people usually call conflict before the work starts.
That's really cool. I mean, what you're saying, I would agree with that. That is negotiation between the two to see how we work together. And I guess often when you approach, say, a team who is in conflict for some reason, they would think that one is the victim, the other one is the predator, and that there is no way of negotiation, that one of them would have to make a compromise, or that one of them is the problematic one. And you can then see how when we have conflicts, how we are driven by assumptions like this person is difficult, or this person always wants to just pick something just to chew on because they're so stressful to be around. And those assumptions are not the most helpful, because they only make the interaction worse and leave less space for, as you say, negotiation and building common ground. So as we were saying earlier, if conflicts are a sign of something that wants to be or needs to be different, then more useful assumptions such as that we're in this together and this is a sign, high loaded with energy usually, because I can't remember in my experience any conflict that would be kind of without high passion. It has always been ignited, like maybe not externally verbalized, but internally. I mean, it's a lot of high energy, isn't it? And stress and a lot of tension. So there is high passion that is driving it. And that can be really useful if used in a productive way.
Mm-hmm. Listening to this piece of high passionate moment, this reminds me this wonderful quote or definition by Jesper Christiansen on conflict, which says conflict is missing coordination between good intentions, and in Biba's way, between good passionate intentions.
Oh yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. It's true. So everybody has good reasons why they're behaving the way they are, don't they? I mean, even though it might be translated as doing the same thing over and over and not meeting the deadline. I mean, we know all those stories. It's quite common practices in organizations, and maybe some people working together that don't like each other. And this reminds me of one example when we were having a workshop on conflicts. It was such a relief for people to find out that they don't have to like each other. They have to work together. So they're working towards a common goal, common tasks, and they don't have to have a beer after work, and that's fine. I mean, not everybody's compatible, are we? But it helps if we are.
And one way when you get into it is that you're an external practitioner, and in at least one big case, you were called in to teach people to go better around with conflicts. Can you please put your like a picture of the moment? I know you develop your way of giving training around conflicts and having better conflicts. You develop it, so maybe your own view or what you think is important in such a situation, it changes too. So that's why I'm saying, what is your moment best idea to teach people to deal better with conflicts in organizations? And it's nice if you can refer to this concrete case as well.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Slovenian government. So I've been working as their external trainer for a couple of years now on different soft skills topics. And one of them was, their narrative was conflict resolution and handling difficult people. So you can see the vocabulary. And this is not finger pointing at all. It's very common vocabulary that we use around the matter. And they wanted, in a nutshell, when we started working, justifiably so, because they were seeing some tensions in the department. And as you know, it's political structure, so different political hierarchies, and some people thinking how others should work, but they then don't. And then some people maybe being in places where they shouldn't be. It's classics. There's nothing new around the world. We see the same cases. And they wanted at the beginning to have a day training where people would learn the tools and strategies for identifying conflicts, so that they would know how to identify conflict and then analyze it to know, to understand what's going on. Because they believed that sort of understanding what's really going on then helps you do something about it. And they also wanted to have some tips and tricks on how to work with difficult people. And of course, there are ways to do that. I mean, there are trainers who would deliver exactly this. And we know that there are different ways towards what's desired change, which don't have to be as painful as to analyze every little bit of why a certain conflict has escalated, because it's always different, isn't it? I mean, every conflict, even between two people, is probably different, because for the sake of being different there, I don't know. And we usually don't have time for this comprehensive analysis, do we? And even if we do, it's probably so stressful and intense that we just can't concentrate. We can't focus on being clear-headed and look at the facts. We look at each other as, well, subjectively. So that might not be the most efficient way of finding a way forward. And actually what we want is not to understand, but we want to know what to do about it, don't we? So we started working from what is the outcome that they want to have from this training. And they said, well, in a nutshell, that they want to, for participants to know how to find a way forward when people are in conflicts. And it turned out that those two were not necessarily connected. So we started training in the way of moving instantly into what you were saying earlier. So negotiating and looking for what's wanted, and seeing each conflict as a sign of a wish for something different, and each conflict as a unique event. So in such, having a manual of conflict resolution is nonsense. If that makes sense, yeah. And I remember that you had some cool cases where you were an external coach, weren't you? Where you came in an organization that had conflicts. That was also a very interesting case.
Thank you. I would like to make two comments on what you just said. Sure. Your case. The one comment is, you say start at looking at what's wanted. And it's wonderful to listen that you did exactly the same. You negotiated with them what's wanted from the training. And I guess this is the basic way a practitioner can go about it, by finding out what's wanted. Equally, yeah. If it's a training, it's an intervention, or it's the relationship itself.
It's true, and it's interesting what you say, because very often people would think, and this is not arguing whether they're right or wrong, it's just maybe that there is something else. They would think that they say that you and I are in conflict, and I want you to stop doing X because it irritates me. So my justified wish is, I want Kati to stop doing X. And I can't think any other way, because this is my reality, this is what irritates me, and you keep doing it, so you keep upsetting me. And then if, say, an external coach comes and asks me, okay, so you want Kati to stop doing X. What would be different for you if she did stop doing X? And then I might say something like, oh, then she wouldn't get on my nerves. And then a coach could say, okay, so then what would you notice about yourself if she stopped going on your nerves? And then you might say something like, oh, I could concentrate on my work better. Okay, and if you had the chance to concentrate on your work better, how would that show? And then I might say something like, well, Kati would notice, because she would be thanking me. So it's sort of releasing of the tensions, but you very rarely can do it on your own, can't you? I mean, very often the external help is quite useful in that sense, just to ask you a couple of questions to make a maybe bigger picture on what is wanted, and more towards the common goal, not towards liking each other better. But this is often the consequence as well.
The other little remark I would like to place is this urge, or this hope, that if we clarify how a conflict looks like and what might lead to a conflict, that somehow helps people involved to deal with it better. This is also a strategy which we see if the conflict goes into the direction we call those cases bullying. And there is a nice research showing that this other strategy of negotiating the wished way of being together, all those people, and strengthening the relationships between all of them who are somehow seeing it, experiencing it, and doing it, that this goes ways beyond in terms of change than if you just clarify and raise attention about bullying. I will link this research somehow to this conversation we are just having.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that makes so much sense. I mean, here in the UK, for instance, companies spend a lot of money on improving mental health at workplace. So that's not clinical, it's climate, culture. And as you say, bullying and mobbing is increasing, isn't it? And we all know unequal treatment and discrimination at workplace. And if you focus on that, as you say, that grows, even if you do it with the intention of lessening it. It's just how it works. And then on the other hand, if you focus on better relationships, increased well-being at workplace, it makes a difference. So it's same coin, but two completely different sides.
And as you mentioned before, as an external practitioner, and that's usually how I arrive in such a story. I'm a solution surfer. I'm training quite a lot, solution-focused way of working, quite often told coaching. And I'm doing this work as well with single people, so in one-to-one settings, but in organizations and teams as well. So when I'm somehow called for such a case, they usually show me this unhappy version of the story, and they really want to do something about the conflict, about the quite often already a long-term unhappy trial to get better work together. And I think this is a big part of the work we do, to switch the coin towards carefully examining what's wanted and generating hope. So you invited me to tell a case, and what comes to my mind right now, because of this work we invest into work on hope and work on relationships more than identifying the causes of the conflict. I think this is a very big part of the whole thing. I'm reminded a case where one leadership team was working together since 1.5 years without having time and chance to clarify their relationships. And then I got the opportunity to work with them while they were doing it 2 days long. So an exceptional situation, but a lot of really long-term conflicts on different levels, even between two parts of this leadership team. And I'm so happy that I invested a lot time in asking the leader of the unit about her hopes for the whole management team, and then also interviewing some of the people, everyone who wanted actually to talk to me, on how would they know that after the event the right change is occurring and their working relationships are better. And the second thing I did in all the conversations was clarifying what makes them at least tiny little bit hopeful that we can reach something like that. And this is how always and all of them slowly but surely turns into, and there are moments when it's better, and there are good reasons to think that we can go together better. And quite often, actually, this passion or engagement you also mentioned is the beginning of the hope, because they all know about themselves and each other that there is passion and there is wish to good the things well.
And this is such a beautiful example of the metaphor that you use. I know that it's surfing on the wave. So wave being the change, and you can go against it and try to fight it and all of that, or you can learn how to surf on it very elegantly, and that seems to be a really good example of doing just that. Finding useful change and then amplifying it so that it grows. It's really cool.
Yes, and in this case, again, someone came from outside, and this outside consultant, me, was even courageous enough to start the whole round then, when we were actually sitting in the same room, with a chat between twos about the others. What do they know about each other that they can count on as a useful contribution? But I think for something like that, you really, really, really need an external who comes and is, I don't even know the right word. Courage is maybe not even enough to be really, go there and make something what's not expected. So I would like to use some minutes with you to collect those examples where someone from and within the organization, what can they do? Maybe the people you trained, how can they change? What examples come to your mind? How people as part of a team, of an organization, can change the chances around conflict?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's very handy if you have a chance to have somebody, or say that the whole team, or maybe two different departments, are not working well together. Then an external, as you say, does the work and then goes. So if anything goes wrong, it's on the person who then leaves. So if you are your own team leader and then you take this responsibility onto your shoulders, next day you have to be with that team. So there is tricky bit in how to define roles, and we have a friend and colleague of ours who sometimes switches hats between the role of a manager and the role of a coach, and he makes it very explicit when is which, so that the team knows exactly, okay, so now we are coaching, so that means that we are on a meta level. So we are not talking about the tasks now, we're talking about possibilities, future possibilities, past resources, all of that. And they then know when it's over, and then he returns back to the manager role. And yet useful change is already happening. So that's one example that comes to my mind. And I get often this question at trainings, I'm sure you do as well, like, okay, it's so cool when you have the freedom to do just coaching, but I have to be a timekeeper, I have to be the reporter, I have to be a manager, I have to be the leader, all of that. So I can't always do the same. And that's fair enough. And of course, you don't want to leave people with the sense that, oh, there's so much that they can do, but they actually can't. But I think that if you take those tools that we teach, to have conversations, and it doesn't have to be conversation around the hot issue. It can be a conversations around coffee, waiting at the queue and at the toilets. It can be everyday conversations that make change a little into the desired direction, little by little by little. So it doesn't have to be the whole package, like say, oh, okay, now we are going to reorganize the whole team and now we're going to do everything what we were taught at the training. It starts, I have a friend in the UK who said once a nice thing. She said, well, it's not the elephants, that make a difference. They come and it's this huge, massive change. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. It's the little ants that make a change, that make a difference. And I think that's reassuring because, say, you do something different, something better for you and for your team. And you don't even have to verbalize it, but you do something different. And when you do something different, somebody will notice and they will respond differently. Yeah. And when they respond differently, you would respond differently because it's inevitable. And then somebody else is going to notice, and that's going to make a difference to somebody that you can't even foresee. So every step is better than no step. And definitely, I mean, we have examples in our experience where people just out of curiosity, because at trainings they're usually so enthusiastic, aren't they? And people have high energy and hopes and all of that is generated. They try a little bit, like a scale. By scale, we mean in solution focused way, we ask scales differently. So we ask what's keeping you at 5 but not lower, rather than the classic way of asking scale, how come you're 5 not higher? And that's a big change in organizations. When they start asking questions like this, people start responding differently, if that makes sense.
And another example, when you say the tools we are teaching, and there was a guy from an organization in a training course. It wasn't about conflict. It was normal solution-focused work. And we were just learning the tool, what's better. It was second session or something like that. And then at one point he became enthusiastic and said, and this is what I will do at home in our meetings, to start with what's better. He recognized that they got all really annoyed by the meetings because tons of things each time, and no one felt really attached in a good way, and everyone hated each other because, and then he made this little change to suggesting the number one agenda to look back the week they had from the last meeting, to talk about those things from last week, which became at least a bit better through their work together. And he was really happy with the change happened around this little tool he learned from Solution Focus.
That's really cool. I think, I often get this, that people, when they start using it and they see changes and they see different responses, different interactions, then sometimes they come back and they say, yeah, but I think that this cannot go on like this for a long time, because we are sort of, what did they say? Leaving behind the problems. So we don't want to face looking into what's wrong, but we would have to at some point. Do you get this sort of responses sometimes? Yeah. And again, this is from their perspective completely justified. Like, you don't want to do like this, and then here's a car coming and it's going to hit you, and you're just focused on somewhere else and it's going to hit you. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because as long as you are not doing entirely manufacturing processes, say, I don't know, I put this candle onto that candle, that's it. And if I don't do it, it doesn't work. But as soon as you got human factor involved in any form, it's not as straightforward. So we don't exactly know, do we, how change happens? We just know that useful change is present all the time. And amplifying it somehow seems to get it growing. And then what's the matter and what's not working, it's not to say that it becomes less or minimizes, it's just that it isn't fueled any longer, and very often it dissolves without even looking into it. And if it doesn't, then you can still look at it, because at some point you will have to, but you will arrive at it from a very different perspective. You would arrive at it full of resources, full of conversations with others that are useful. And imagine, if you come equipped like this to, say, a problematic situation, what are your chances of making it better than if you are constantly looking at it with this hopeless and despair, like, oh, it will never get better and we hate each other anyway.
Wow. So Biba, if we are rounding this up in somehow, what would be one more thing you would like to add on, to emphasize, tell as a little additional story? What would be your last input into this conversation when we look back what we were talking about so far?
Oh yeah, I didn't know what to say for a moment, but now I hear one of my participants in my head when they were practicing, because the way we teach, you and me and all of us who work with this approach, we always teach through exercises so that people try, was them discovering, oh, but you know, if I look at the other person from the perspective that they want something, I just may not yet know what it is, but they're motivated towards something and they have the resources and they're cooperating only in a very, for me, strange way. This is actually not about them at all. It's about me. So it's about how I see the world, how I see my colleagues, because how I see is how they will likely respond. Of course, they can still have a very shitty day and they could still be nasty, but if I approach them with an assumption that they're doing the best they can, and nobody has it easy, and everybody's stressed, and everybody can have a very shitty day, it makes a difference to how I am in my work, in my personal life, in burnout levels, and that revelation that those tools and techniques, well, we know we work, and they're not just to improve relationship at work, they're for people to sort of maintain their well-being and mental health at a level that they're pleased with. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
What about you? What's your sort of, when it's always inspiring when we talk about those things and always new thoughts emerge? What's emerged for you at this point?
Yes, I just admired your somehow very, very simple and profound way you were just talking, and this reminds me something I learned within my own company with my very dear colleague Moni. We once had someone who worked for us, and we recognized that we were again and again talking about her among us, and it wasn't a resource gossip. And within quite a short time, we learned something very simple I can use since. We recognized we are talking about her, so we stopped talking about her and started to talk with her. And this is one of my best own tool to take care about my working relationships. If I'm recognizing I'm talking more about this person than to her, or I'm talking not that happy and satisfied about our connection or our way of working together that I want to, then it's time to look for the contact and change it towards better. Let's, for instance, we initiate a coffee to talk about how we would like to see our work. But going from talking about a person towards working with a person is, since this one case, something I really can use for myself when I'm part of the situation and part of the maybe emerging conflict.
Oh, that's really cool. What difference has that made for you and your team?
Boy, that made, in that concrete case, it just, I think, as it occurred, this idea, the difference was that we had a much shorter time to figure out that we don't fit. And that colleague left the team, actually, but happy ever after. So she found a much better way for herself, but we didn't fit well. And since then, the difference which occurs is that we are much happier in our own talks when we are talking about the colleagues or whatever work brings. And I think we have faster clarification processes of if any misunderstandings of less useful ways occur.
That sounds really good. Yeah, thank you for this example.
Yeah, you just somehow reminded me of this. Yeah. Hey, thank you, Biba.
And you.
I stopped the recording. That's okay.